Have you ever wondered if the government supports big business or small business or both? Like, how does this work? Why does it matter? Well, if you're a business owner and entrepreneur, it absolutely matters. It absolutely impacts you. So if you're in that group, you probably want to pay attention, take some notes here real quick. First of all, in this country, there are two tax systems, one for W-2 employees and 1099 employees, basically, who are going to pay a much higher tax rate on earned income. And then another part of the tax system is those who have capital, who invest in business that create all of the jobs, that create all of the growth. And the government, thank goodness, for the last several, 100 years, decided and knew, well, if we incentivize, everything's about incentive programs, right? If you incentivize entrepreneurship that creates businesses and growth and products and services and everything that improves our average, way of living and our average lifestyle. And that's why it pays to be a business owner. And by the way, you can be a W-2 paid employee, have a job, and have side hustles where you are taking advantage of entrepreneurship and this tax system and the way it benefits entrepreneurs and business owners in this country. So that's the first piece of it. The tax system really kind of benefits both. There's certainly some examples of where it benefits big corporations a lot more than small, but overall, the idea is that it's encouraging, incentivizing entrepreneurship and business growth, with whether you're big or small. Let's look at the next thing. There are these things called subsidies. Subsidies are basically when the government takes money and they help different sectors of the economy. For example, there are different small farmers, big corporation farmers, small farmers that are in different groups. And for example, in the corn industry, they wanted to incentivize ethanol, the government did, so that they could create different fuels and different things. And so they would, basically give these farming corporations money, because without it, they couldn't be profitable, they couldn't stay in business. But it really does benefit both big and small. However, there are examples of subsidies benefiting massive corporations substantially more than smaller ones. For example, Amazon has created and built all of these different warehouses and distribution networks and physical infrastructure across the country to be able to distribute products. Amazon has benefited substantially from tax incentives and all other sorts of incentives by smart states and cities who have said, Amazon, come here. We'd love for you to create all these jobs. And actually, you're going to create a lot of tax revenue. If you're a small business owner, do you get those kind of breaks? No, you do not. It is definitely, there's a lot of examples of subsidies benefiting bigger corporations more than small businesses. Another example of this, during the 2008 and 2009 recession, we had the banking system almost collapse. And so again, all these big banks got bailed out. Did the small ones get bailed out? No, they went out of business. So again, another example of where government absolutely was looking out more for the big banks than the small banks. Now, at the same time, we got to be objective and realize, well, actually, that would have destroyed a lot of people's lives who had all their money, retirement, and things in these banks. And let's look at some other examples of where big corporations benefited way more than little ones. Let's talk about the pandemic. As the pandemic happened in 2020 and 2021, what happened to small business owners was an absolute travesty. Small business owners were shut down, especially in a lot of the bluer states like your Californias, your New Yorks, your Illinois, and different areas. Like, it was like living in a different country. These places were shut down. These business owners went out of business. Now, what about the big businesses? Were they shut down during the pandemic? Nope. If you were Walmart, you were open from day one, no problem. If you were Home Depot, no problem. If you were a big grocery store chain, which don't make huge profits, and they are definitely necessary, but did all of those small restaurants and small food shops, did they get to stay open? For the most part, a lot of areas they didn't. Eventually they reopened depending on the state that you were in. So another example of where big business was favored more than small. Now, I will flip that a little bit. There is this program called the ERC, and there were, of course, these PPP loans. They did help specifically small businesses who were shut down, who were affected. And these were programs, if you had, less than 400 or 500 employees, that did benefit small business. So we have to objectively say, hey, there's another example where small business ultimately was helped out. And then as time has gone by, now they've sort of pulled that program out and pulled the rug out from business owners who definitely did qualify for that ERC, and now the IRS is saying, no, actually you don't qualify, or they're making them jump through all these hoops. And so another example of, well, no, actually they're not benefiting them. And at the end of the day, probably the biggest example of this is in the financial industry, pharma, and energy. And what happens is if you're in one of those industries, there's this thing called regulatory capture. And regulatory capture means that it's so difficult to cover all of the regulation costs to be in compliance and hire attorneys and make sure that you're following all of these guidelines that it's very difficult for small businesses to be able to compete, and certainly the big businesses benefit big time. So overall, as we've gone through this and we've looked at the history, we've looked at the data, overall there's certainly benefits for both compared to not being a business owner and entrepreneur, so you want to be able to do that. But ultimately, big business does get favored more, and that's why as a small business owner, 82% go out of business because of cash flow, and that's why I created a free book for you to be able to download the 3 cash flow secrets that will help you stay in business, help you generate 7 figures of business, and help you compete with the big corporations of the world. So check out cashflowsecrets.com, get that free book so that you can get your money right as a business owner and still be able to compete and take down the big corporations.